You're listening to Talking Law with Despina Priala and Wayno. Thanks for joining us again, Despina. This morning, we just heard before the break, private school parents and guardians might want to listen up for this particular story. It's hitting headlines in Canberra, but Despina, you're bringing it to our attention because you believe that it could apply to almost anyone that is involved in a private school contract.
Yes, because I've actually experienced it myself. So I obviously am a parent. I've got two children. We've been through the schooling system. I'm happy that my two children are out of the school system now. My youngest graduated last year, but I've actually been through this myself with two schools on the Gold Coast who tried to impart this particular, I'll call it a penalty, which I'll explain in a minute, onto me, which I successfully argued against. But I wanted to bring it to the attention of parents because me being a lawyer, it's obviously easier for me to argue the point with schools in this case, whereas lay people who are not lawyers might find it a bit more difficult, as did these parents. So what happened in the ACT, these parents took the school called Brindabella Christian College. They took them to ACAT, which is the equivalent to QCAT in Queensland and NCAT in New South Wales. So the Administrative Tribunal. Civil matters. And what happened is at the end of the school year, the parents pulled their children out of the school, but they didn't give a whole term's notice. So typically what you'll find in school contracts when you enroll your children is part of the contract is if you want to take your kids out of the school, you've got to give a whole term's notice in advance to the school. Otherwise, the school will charge you for that entire term school fees. Now, and that's very typical on the Gold Coast. I know that for a fact with private schools. So I think it's an unfair contract term, and the ruling in essence that was handed down in 2022, they agreed with that. So they sided with the parents, didn't agree with the school, and they found that this term was an unfair contract term. And I think that's an absolute correct decision because when you put your kids into school and you enroll them in school, you really don't have a chance to actually negotiate the terms of your school contract. Here's the school you want to put your kids in. Here's the contract. Sign away. Nobody really reads these terms. It might have been mentioned to you in passing. Oh, yeah, by the way, if you want to pull your kids out, there's a whole term notice you got to give. Nobody really thinks about that. And then sometimes things happen in your life where you can't just give a whole 10 or 12 weeks advance notice. You might have to relocate urgently, or there might be some other circumstances, or maybe there's an incident at the school that's happened which has forced you, or you want to just take your children out of that school because you're not happy with the school and you don't want to give, or you can't give a whole term's notice. So I've always thought it's a penalty where the school says, yeah, you're going to pay a whole school term's fees because you didn't give us the notice. Really?
It's
Really?
a lot.
It's a lot of money just because we didn't give you that notice. And why do you need that notice in the first place? And that's what we want to get to. Do you really need it? Is it going to protect the school? How does it protect the school? Why? What's the necessity for it? And this is what came out in the ruling with this particular matter. And ACAT rejected a lot of arguments that the school put forward about, well, we needed to protect our interests, we need to have this advance notice, and they rejected all of that in this particular case based on these facts and circumstances, that it's not necessary to legitimately protect the school's interest. And I can agree with that from a common sense point of view. So if you look at most of the private schools have waiting lists. And I think every parent who wants to get their kids in a private school will definitely put their hand up and say, oh, yes, well, I had a waiting list. I had to wait to get my child in the school. So if it's a waiting list, you have to say to yourself, well, what's the detriment to the school if you don't give a whole term's notice? You've got a whole waiting list. So it's not like there are gaps that the school suddenly now doesn't have a particular number or quota that they've reached. They can just slot someone else in, can't they?
Yeah, plenty of people waiting at the front gate to get in.
Plenty of people waiting at the front gate. And I think that that's what came out in this case, and I totally agree with that. The facts and circumstances of this case were that the children were pulled out at the end of the school year, which again, you say to yourself, well, the school's got all of that holiday period, 2 or 3 months to work out and reorganize their numbers, their quotas, ring parents who are on waiting lists, even more so in that case, as opposed to in the middle of the year. And as I said before, I've faced this myself with 2 schools on the Gold Coast, and I successfully won because I pointed this out to them that you have a waiting list. This is not detrimental to you that I've pulled the children out at the last minute because of these circumstances, and I'm not going to pay. And that's it. But not everybody would understand or know how to do that. And I wanted to let people know of this case. It's really relevant. So if you find yourself in this situation on the Gold Coast, you want to point out the Brindabella case.
Yep. And so has that condition, would you expect to find that condition eventually taken out of the contracts, or is it just going to be there and this thing will have to play out again and again and again?
I think that the schools will be reviewing this because of the unfair contract terms regime that's coming out later this year, because it was deemed to be an unfair contract term, because it's a term where you can't bargain, you can't negotiate. And those sorts of terms where we just say this is the way it is are often classed as unfair contract terms because you don't have the ability to negotiate, and it's really not serving any benefit for all parties concerned. So I think it's a space to watch, but certainly if you're facing that here on the Gold Coast today, that you need to understand the Brindabella case, look it up yourself online and be aware of it if you have to face that, because I know that private school fees are not cheap, and paying a whole school term's worth of fees in addition to paying your new school fee, it's not something you want to do.
Yep. No way. Well, thank you so much again, Despina, for joining us this morning. You are a busy, busy gal because you're actually guest speaking tomorrow at the Star. Is that correct?
I am actually. I'm very, very excited. This is the Queensland Law Society's annual Gold Coast Legal Conference, and we're having it at the Star Casino. So I am presenting in the afternoon on off-the-plan contracts and challenges we face. We've talked about that a lot on air, but yes, I'm presenting to the legal profession, so I'm very excited. Looking forward.
So you got to get to the hair appointment now, haven't you?
Well, if I have time. We'll
Nails done. Get stage ready.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Despina. If anyone does want to get in touch with you directly, where can they go?
So they can phone the office 55291 294. They can email info@prialalegal.com.au, and this will be up on YouTube by the end of the week as usual.
Terrific. We'll see you next week, and enjoy the conference tomorrow.
Thank you. I will. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.